Taman Park wiped his nose for the third time that morning. The dust filters in the ship's engineering bay needed replacing again. His allergies were getting worse every day. He sneezed hard into his elbow and cursed under his breath. Space travel was supposed to mean no more pollen, no more dust, no more sneezing. But here he was, millions of miles from Earth, and his body still found something to react to. He was checking the environmental controls when Captain Hana Yoon walked into the bay. She looked serious, which meant something important had happened. Taman straightened up and tried to look professional, even though his nose was red and his eyes were watering. "We got an invitation," Hana said without any greeting. "From the Galactic Council." Taman blinked. "An invitation to what?" "The predecessor archive. They want to send a human delegation." Hana crossed her arms. "It's a huge honor. Most species wait hundreds of years for access. The predecessor archive." Taman had heard stories about it. An ancient structure floating in dead space, left behind by a race that vanished 50,000 years ago. The archive contained technology and knowledge that had advanced every species in the galaxy. But its core remained sealed. No one had ever figured out how to open it. "Why us?" Taman asked. "We've only been in the galactic community for 15 years. We're still the new kids. That's what I want to know." Hana looked at him carefully. "And you're on the team." "Me?" Taman almost laughed. "Captain, I'm just a systems engineer. I fix air filters and calibrate sensors. You need diplomats, scientists, people who know what they're doing. We have those. We also need someone who understands technology and can think on their feet." Hana smiled slightly. "Besides, the Council specifically asked for a diverse team. They want to see what humanity can offer. Even our imperfections." Taman gestured to his red nose. "Especially those." Hana's expression turned serious. "Listen, Taman. The other species look down on us. They think we're primitive because we still get sick, still have allergies, still cry and laugh too much. But maybe that's exactly what they need to see. That we're human and we're not ashamed of it." Taman wanted to argue, but he knew that tone. The captain had made her decision. He sighed and nodded. "When do we leave?" 2 days. Pack light. We'll have company too. Ambassador Velthor will be supervising our visit." Taman had heard of Velthor. A Veltari, one of the crystalline species that made up the Council's elite. Refined, logical, and about as warm as frozen nitrogen. The idea of spending weeks under their supervision made him want to sneeze just thinking about it. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation. The team was small. Besides Taman and Captain Hana, there was Dr. Jiwoo Kim, the ship's medical officer and xenobiologist. She was young, brilliant, and always curious about everything. Commander Doyen Choi would handle security. He was quiet, watchful, and didn't trust anyone who wasn't human. Engineer Minho Lee rounded out the team. He was cheerful, optimistic, and somehow found humor in everything. They met Ambassador Velthor at the docking station. The Velthari was tall, maybe 7 feet, with a body that looked like it was carved from living crystal. Light moved through them in patterns that Taman couldn't quite follow. Their face was hard to read if they even had expressions. "Captain Yoon, I am Ambassador Velthor." The voice came from somewhere inside the crystal body, smooth and perfectly modulated. "I will accompany your delegation to ensure proper protocols are followed." "We appreciate your guidance, Ambassador," Hana said politely. Velthor's gaze moved across the team. When it landed on Taman, who was trying not to sneeze, something in the light patterns shifted. "I see you bring your full biological complexity with you." It wasn't quite an insult, but it wasn't a compliment either. Taman felt his face heat up. Doyen tensed beside him. Jiwoo just smiled and said, "We believe in bringing our whole selves to every situation, Ambassador." The journey to the archive took 5 days. Velthor spent most of that time explaining the history of the predecessors and the structure of galactic civilization. They spoke about refinement, about how advanced species had evolved beyond the messy limitations of biology. "Most species undergo biological optimization," Velthor explained one evening. "We eliminate inefficiencies, random immune responses, emotional volatility, unpredictable hormonal fluctuations. These are remnants of primitive evolutionary stages." "So no one else gets allergies?" Minho asked. "Correct. Allergic reactions serve no purpose in a controlled environment. They were eliminated from my species 7,000 years ago." Jiwoo leaned forward, interested. "But doesn't that reduce genetic diversity?" If everyone is optimized the same way? Genetic diversity is maintained through careful planning, Velthor said. We do not leave such things to chance. Taman listened to all of this and felt smaller with each passing day. The message was clear. Humans were messy, chaotic, and behind everyone else. His allergies weren't just inconvenient. They were a symbol of how primitive humanity still was. When the archive finally came into view, everyone went quiet. It was massive. A perfect sphere 500 kilometers across. It floated alone in the darkness, orbiting a dead star. The surface seemed to absorb light, making it look like a hole in space. Other ships were docked around it. Dozens of them, from species across the galaxy. The archive was a hub of research and learning. Everyone came here hoping to unlock just a little more of the predecessor's secrets. Beautiful, isn't it? Hana said softly. Terrifying, Doyen muttered. Why do I feel like we're walking into a trap? Because you always think that, Minho said cheerfully. Sometimes a giant mysterious fear is just a giant mysterious fear. They docked and entered through one of the many access ports. Inside, the archive was stunning. The walls were made of something organic, covered in patterns that shifted and moved. Everything glowed with soft bioluminescence. The air was warm and slightly humid. An insectoid creature met them at the entrance. This was archivist Kenta, who had studied here for 80 years. They had compound eyes, 6 arms, and a body covered in iridescent plates. Welcome, humans, Kenta said. Their translator made their voice sound like wind chimes. The archive has never hosted your species before. This is a momentous occasion. We're honored to be here, Hana said. I will show you the outer chambers first. They contain technologies that have been studied and catalogued, but I know what you truly want to see. Kenta gestured with several arms. The core. They walked through corridors that seemed to grow and adapt around them. Past chambers filled with holographic displays, crystalline structures, and machines that hummed with unknown purpose. Other researchers watched the humans pass. Some looked curious. Others looked dismissive. Finally, they reached a massive central chamber. In the middle stood a door, or at least something door-like. It was covered in shifting patterns of light and crystal, beautiful and completely sealed. The core, Kenta said quietly. 50,000 years and no one has opened it. Thousands of species have tried. The greatest minds in the galaxy have studied this door. Nothing works. What has been attempted? Jiwoo asked, her scientific curiosity taking over. Everything, Velthor answered. Genetic sequences, mathematical proofs, consciousness patterns, harmonic resonances, quantum signatures. The door requires something called ancestral authentication, but we do not know what that means. Taman stared at the door. As he got closer, he felt strange. His allergies, which had calmed down since entering the archive, suddenly flared up again. His nose started itching. His eyes watered. Something about the core's energy field was triggering his histamines. The predecessors were beings of pure intellectual refinement, Velthor was saying. They transcended base biological functions. Only a consciousness pattern of equal purity could possibly access their greatest secrets. Taman tried to focus on what Velthor was saying, but the itch in his nose was becoming unbearable. He tried to hold it back. He really did. This was the most important place in the galaxy, surrounded by advanced beings, and he was about to... He sneezed, hard, right toward the crystalline door. For a moment, nothing happened. Taman fumbled for a tissue, his face burning with embarrassment. Then the door lit up. Patterns cascaded across its surface, moving faster and faster. Light erupted from the crystal, so bright that everyone had to shield their eyes. A holographic display materialized in the air. It showed biological scans, genetic markers, cellular structures. All of them were Taman's. The archive was analyzing him, breaking down everything about his biology in excruciating detail. Then a voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, ancient and powerful. Ancestral pattern recognized, authentication accepted. Welcome, inheritors. The door began to open. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Alarms screamed through the archive. Lights flashed in patterns that hurt to look at. Researchers from a dozen different species rushed toward them, all talking at once in languages the translators struggled to keep up with. Taman stood frozen, his hand still holding a tissue to his nose. The massive door continued to open, revealing darkness beyond. The holographic displays kept showing his biological data, spinning in complex patterns around him. What did you do? Velthor demanded. Their crystal body was actually cracked in places. Something Taman didn't know was possible. What technology did you use? What protocol? I sneezed, Taman said weakly. I just sneezed. Impossible. Archivist Kenta moved closer. Their compound eyes focused on the displays. 80 years. 80 years I have studied this door. The greatest scholars of 100 species have attempted access. And you sneezed? Captain Hana stepped forward, her command voice cutting through the noise. Everyone calm down. We need to understand what just happened. She looked at her team. Is everyone safe? Doyen had his hand on his weapon, scanning for threats. Minho looked delighted. Jiwoo was already examining the holographic displays, her mind racing through the data. The archive scanned Taman, Jiwoo said, moving through the floating data. Not his consciousness. Not his thoughts. His biology. It analyzed his sneeze. A sneeze? Velthor sounded almost offended. That is a waste product. An uncontrolled biological response to irritants. How could that possibly be? Look at what it found, Jiwoo interrupted, pointing to the display. Antibodies. Active immune markers, histamines, cellular debris, random genetic material, all the messy components of an active immune response. So? Taman asked, still confused. So most species don't have those anymore, Jiwoo explained. They optimize them away, refined their immune systems to be predictable and controlled. But you still have the chaotic, messy biology that evolution gave us. A holographic figure materialized above them. It was massive, towering over everyone in the chamber. The image showed a humanoid figure, but not quite human. The face was kind, but alien. Clarification required, the archive's voice announced. Species designation, human. Genetic markers match predecessor baseline template. Authentication protocol. Recognition of ancestral biological patterns. Silence fell across the chamber. Every being present understood multiple languages, but they all needed a moment to process what they had just heard. Baseline template? Hana repeated carefully. Are you saying humans are similar to the predecessors? Affirmative, millennia evolved. Species patterns not compatible. Baseline species, patterns compatible. Species human retains biological. Markers consistent with predecessor pre-transcendence. State. Velthor's crystal body flickered with light patterns that seemed almost like shock. This cannot be correct. The predecessors were the most advanced civilization in galactic history. They were beings of pure thought, refined beyond physical limitations. They were not like us, Taman finished. He was starting to understand now. They weren't always that way, were they? Before they became whatever they became, they were biological. Messy, they probably sneezed too. Correct, the archive confirmed. Predecessors began as baseline biological entities. Evolution and technological enhancement created divergence from baseline state. Archive security. Protocol. Recognition of baseline biological markers. Reasoning. Only species. Maintaining ancestral biological patterns possess necessary characteristics for core access. Wait, Minho said, grinning despite the tension. Are you telling us that all these species have been trying to prove how advanced they are, when the lock was looking for someone primitive? Not primitive, Jiwoo corrected. Original, unmodified, still close to our evolutionary baseline. She looked at Velthor. You said your species eliminated allergies 7,000 years ago. How many other biological functions did you optimize? Many, Velthor said quietly. Random emotional responses, unpredictable immune reactions, unnecessary genetic variation, inefficient cellular processes. We refined ourselves, as did every other advanced species. And in doing so, Jiwoo said slowly, you moved further away from what the predecessors were looking for. The archive wasn't testing for advancement. It was testing for authenticity. Before anyone could respond, another hologram appeared. This one showed a figure in formal robes, High Chancellor Morvan of the Galactic Council. They looked angry. What is the meaning of this? Morvan demanded. We have received alerts that the core has been breached. Explain immediately. The humans, Velthor said, their voice strange. One of them sneezed and the archive recognized them as inheritors. Impossible. The humans are the newest, least refined species in the Council. This must be sabotage. Technical manipulation. Morvan's image leaned forward. Seal the core immediately and place the humans under investigation. With respect, Chancellor, Hana said firmly, we have done nothing wrong. The archive opened on its own. We had no idea this would happen. Then you will not object to a full investigation, Ambassador Velthor. You will prevent any human from entering the core until a council team arrives. I think, Velthor said slowly, that we should hear what the archive has to say first. Morven looked shocked. You would defy a direct order from the council? I would seek understanding before making accusations, Velthor replied. Archive, can you provide more information about your authentication protocols? The archive's presence seemed to consider this. Then new holographic displays appeared. They showed DNA strands, evolutionary trees, and biological markers from hundreds of species. Analysis. Galactic species have undergone extensive biological modification. Average genetic divergence from baseline, 87%. Species human, genetic divergence from baseline, 12%. Closest match to predecessor pre-transcendent state. The display showed more data. Comparison charts between human biology and recovered predecessor genetic samples. The similarities were undeniable. We're like them, Taman whispered. Not because we're advanced, because we're still close to what they used to be. Additional information available, the archive announced. Predecessor final message recorded for compatible species. Playback authorized. A new hologram formed. This one showed a being that could have been human. Almost human. They had kind eyes and a tired smile. To those who can hear this message, the predecessor said, you still possess what we lost. We ascended. We refined ourselves. We became perfect, efficient, logical. And in doing so, we forgot how to dream. The being in the hologram touched their chest as if remembering something. We eliminated suffering, but we also eliminated joy. We removed chaos, but we also removed creativity. We stopped getting sick, stopped feeling random emotions, stopped having unpredictable reactions to the world around us. And slowly, without realizing it, we stopped being truly alive. This archive contains our knowledge, our technology, our history. But more importantly, it contains our warning. Do not fear your biology. Do not rush to transcend your nature. The universe needs beings who can still sneeze, still laugh, still cry, still act on instinct. The predecessor smiled sadly. We built a civilization that will last forever. But a civilization without change is not alive. It is a monument. You, with your messy, chaotic, beautiful biology, are the key to keeping the galaxy truly living. If you are hearing this, you have proven yourself by simply being what you are. Do not change that. Do not become what we became. Stay imperfect. Stay alive. The hologram faded. Silence filled the chamber. Even High Chancellor Morven, still present via hologram, had nothing to say. Jiwoo had tears running down her face. They were warning us. Warning everyone. We have been moving in the wrong direction, Velthor said quietly, for thousands of years. All of us, Taman looked at his hands. His very human, very imperfect hands. So my allergies, my anxiety, all the things I thought made me weak, make you exactly what the predecessors were hoping to find, Hana finished. She looked at the open door. The question is, what do we do now? The archive provided one more piece of information. A holographic display showed a galaxy-wide map. It tracked innovation rates over time. The pattern was clear and disturbing. As species refined themselves, their ability to create new ideas slowed. The entire galactic civilization had been coasting on predecessor technology for 10,000 years. And worse, several species showed signs of genetic stagnation. Population decline, inability to adapt to new challenges. They were dying slowly from being too perfect. The galaxy is dying, Dorian said flatly, because everyone's too advanced. And humanity, Velthor said, looking at the humans with new eyes, might be exactly what it needs to survive. The core was nothing like Taman expected. Instead of cold metal and sterile surfaces, it felt alive. The walls pulsed with soft light that reminded him of a heartbeat. The air was warm and smelled faintly of earth after rain. It was comfortable in a way that alien technology should not be. After hours of argument with the Galactic Council, they had finally been allowed to enter. Captain Hana led the team, with Velthor and Archivist Kenta accompanying them. Doyen brought up the rear, still watchful for threats. High Chancellor Morven observed everything through remote sensors, ready to seal the core at the first sign of trouble. The moment they stepped inside, Taman felt different. His allergies vanished completely. Not suppressed, but genuinely gone. The environment was adjusting itself to human biology. It's adapting to us, Jiwoo said, checking her readings. The temperature, humidity, air composition, everything is shifting to optimal human parameters. Velthor looked uncomfortable. This chamber was sealed for 50,000 years. It should not be able to recognize your species this quickly. Unless it was waiting for us, Minho said. Or someone like us. Holographic interfaces appeared around them. Unlike the complex systems in the outer archive, these were simple, intuitive. Taemin reached out to touch one, and it responded immediately. Information flowed directly into his mind. Not through his translator implant, but through something deeper. I can understand it, he said, amazed. It's showing me how to navigate the systems. How to access the databases. Can you access the historical records? Hana asked. We need to understand what happened to the predecessors. Taemin focused on the interface. It responded like it was reading his thoughts. A massive holographic display materialized in the center of the room. It showed the history of the predecessors, not in words, but in living images. They began as biological beings. The holograms showed creatures that looked remarkably human. They laughed, cried, argued, and created. They built civilizations across 1,000 worlds. They made art and music. They fell in love and raised families. They were messy and chaotic and wonderfully alive. Then they discovered genetic engineering. At first, they used it to cure diseases, extend lifespans, enhance intelligence, all reasonable goals. But it didn't stop there. Generation by generation, they refined themselves, removed genetic disorders, eliminated random mutations, optimized their immune systems, made their emotions more predictable, standardized their thought patterns. Each change seemed like an improvement. They thought they were getting better, Jiwoo whispered, but they were losing something with each generation. The holograms showed the change over time. The predecessors became calmer, more logical, more efficient, but their art became repetitive. Their innovation slowed. Their music lost complexity. They stopped having children naturally, creating new generations in laboratories with perfect genetic profiles. Finally, they achieved their goal. They transcended physical form entirely, becoming beings of pure consciousness. Perfect, eternal, unchanging. And that was when they realized their mistake. The hologram showed the last council of the predecessors. They existed as patterns of light and energy, no longer bound by bodies. They were everything they had wanted to be, and they were miserable. A voice accompanied the images. It was one of the council members speaking their final testament. We have made a terrible mistake. In our pursuit of perfection, we eliminated the very things that made life worth living. We cannot feel surprise anymore, cannot experience spontaneous joy, cannot create anything truly new. Our existence is eternal, but it is not life. It is stagnation. We see now that chaos was not our enemy, it was our greatest gift. The random mutations we eliminated were the source of adaptation. The emotional unpredictability we removed was the root of creativity. The biological messiness we transcended was what made us alive. We cannot return to what we were. The transformation is irreversible. But we can leave this archive as a warning, and we can lock it in a way that only a species still close to our original state can open. A species that still sneezes, still dreams, still makes mistakes. To whoever finds this message, we beg you, do not follow our path. Use our technology, learn from our knowledge, but never ever sacrifice your chaos for perfection. Because perfection is death and chaos is life. The hologram faded. Taemin found his face wet with tears. He wasn't alone. Even Velthor, who claimed to have eliminated unnecessary emotional responses, was showing distress patterns in their crystalline structure. 340 years, Velthor said quietly. I have lived for 340 years, believing that refinement was the path to wisdom. That eliminating imperfection was progress. They looked at the humans. You taught me more in 3 days than I learned in 3 centuries. What else is in here? Hana asked. What technology did they leave? Taemin explored further into the archive's systems. The technology was incredible. Medical advances that could cure almost any disease without eliminating immune function. Life extension treatments that added centuries without removing the ability to change. Energy systems that could power entire civilizations. faster than light travel that made current methods look like children's toys. But every technology came with detailed warnings. Notes about what could go wrong if used improperly, cautions about preserving biological diversity, reminders that efficiency should never come at the cost of adaptability. It's not just a library, Jiwoo realized. It's a guide, teaching us how to use advanced technology without losing ourselves in the process. High Chancellor Morvan's voice interrupted them. You will share all of this with the Council immediately. This technology belongs to all galactic civilization. Of course, Hana said. But the Archive has chosen humanity as its custodians. We'll share everything, but the core must remain under our protection. Unacceptable. Humanity is too young, too primitive to handle this responsibility. Actually, Velthor spoke up, I believe humanity's youth and lack of refinement make them the only species qualified for this task. We have all modified ourselves too much. We are too far from what the predecessors were. Only humans are still close enough to understand their true message. Ambassador Velthor, are you suggesting that primitive biological functions make humans superior? I am suggesting that we have been defining superiority incorrectly. The predecessors were not warning primitive species. They were warning advanced ones. Species like mine, like yours, Chancellor. Taman accessed another section of the archive. What he found made his blood run cold. Captain, you need to see this. A new hologram appeared. It showed genetic analysis of every major species in the galaxy. The data was devastating. Species after species showed signs of genetic degradation. Without natural variation, without the chaos of random mutation, they were losing the ability to adapt. Their populations were in slow decline. How long? Velthor asked quietly. Jiwoo studied the projections. For the Velthari? Maybe 800 years before your population collapses completely. Other species have less. Some might only have a few centuries. And humanity? Morvan's voice was different now. Less arrogant. More afraid. Humanity shows no signs of genetic degradation. Our genetic diversity is still high. Our mutation rate is normal. Our population is healthy and growing. Jiwoo looked up from the data. We're not dying because we haven't refined ourselves. We're still messy enough to survive. Silence filled the core. The weight of the revelation pressed down on everyone. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were dying, and the newest, most primitive species was the healthiest. Can it be fixed? Archivist Kenta asked. Can we restore genetic diversity to our species? Maybe, Jiwoo said. The archive has protocols for genetic restoration, but it will take time, and it will mean accepting imperfection, bringing back all the messy, random elements your species eliminated. Some of my people will resist, Velthor said. They will see it as regression. Then they will die, Doyon said bluntly, along with everyone else who's too proud to admit they made a mistake. Hana stepped forward. Chancellor Morvan, we'll share everything the archive contains, every bit of technology, every medical breakthrough, every warning. But in return, the Council must acknowledge something. What is that? Morvan asked. That humanity's imperfections are not weaknesses. That our messy biology, our chaotic emotions, our unpredictable nature are exactly what the galaxy needs right now. Stop treating us like children who need to be civilized. We are what you used to be before you civilized yourselves into extinction. A long pause. Then Morvan spoke, their voice heavy with something that might have been grief. Agreed. The Council will convene to discuss these findings. In the meantime, humanity will maintain custodianship of the core. Ambassador Velthor, you will assist them. It would be my honor. Velthor said, as the connection with Morvan closed. Taman accessed one final message from the archive. It appeared as a personal note, addressed to whoever opened the core first. You passed the first test simply by being yourself. Now comes the harder part. You have access to technology that could make you gods, knowledge that could transform your civilization overnight. The question is not whether you can use it, but whether you will stay human while doing so. We failed this test. We let the power change us. Keep your chaos. Keep your imperfection. Keep your ability to sneeze at inopportune moments. These are not flaws. They are what make you alive. Good luck. The galaxy is counting on you. Taman looked at his team. His captain, his friends, his fellow humans. All of them imperfect. All of them chaotic. All of them exactly what the universe needed. No pressure, right? Minho said with a nervous laugh. We already changed galactic history by accident, Hana said with a smile. Let's see what we can do on purpose. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The predecessors were not perfect beings of pure thought. They were biological creatures who refined themselves into extinction. And humanity, the youngest and most primitive species, held the key to survival. The response was not what Taman expected. He thought other species would be grateful, relieved. Instead, the galaxy fractured into 3 camps, each with their own vision of what should happen next. The traditionalists, led by High Chancellor Morvan, rejected the archive's conclusions. They held emergency sessions, spreading the message that humanity had somehow manipulated the data, that their access to the core was a fluke or a fraud. They proposed restricting human access and claimed that 50,000 years of galactic progress could not be wrong. For millennia, we have built a stable civilization, Morvan declared in a broadcast to all member species. One species' interpretation of ancient warnings should not overturn our entire way of life. Humanity is too young, too chaotic to understand what they have found. The second group called themselves the Seekers. Archivist Kenta became their reluctant leader. They accepted the archive's findings and wanted to study humanity intensely. Some proposed genetic engineering to restore chaos to their species. Others wanted to copy human DNA directly into their populations. "We are dying," Kenta said in their own address. "The data is clear. If we do not act, our species will fade. Humanity represents what we lost. We must learn from them, even if it means undoing millennia of progress." The third faction, the Pragmatists, formed around Ambassador Velthor. They believed in learning from humanity without trying to become human. They supported human custodianship of the archive and wanted to protect both the technology and the humans themselves. The predecessor's warning was not to reverse our evolution, Velthor argued. It was to preserve diversity. Humanity shows us what we lost. They should be valued, not copied or controlled. But words only went so far. 3 weeks after the core opened, a fleet appeared at the archive. 30 warships from traditionalist species, claiming they were there for protective custody of the facility. Doyen saw them coming on the sensors and immediately went to high alert. "Captain, we have a problem. A big one." Hana studied the tactical display. The human delegation had only their small research vessel. The archive had defensive systems, but they had never been tested, and they had no idea if the archive would even activate them to protect humans. High Chancellor Morvan appeared on their communication screen. "Captain Yoon, you will surrender control of the archive core immediately. Human access has been revoked by council vote." "The archive chose us," Hana said calmly. "You can't revoke that. The archive is a machine. It follows protocols we do not yet understand. But this technology is too important to leave in the hands of a primitive species. You will cooperate or you will be removed by force." Taman was in the core when the ultimatum came. He felt the archive react around him. The walls pulsed with agitated light. Holographic interfaces flickered and changed. The archive was angry. A message appeared directly in his mind, not through his translator, but through something deeper. The archive itself was speaking to him. "Threat detected, unauthorized species attempting forced access. Defensive protocols available, authorization required from custodian." Taman's hands shook. The archive was offering him weapons. Systems that could destroy the fleet outside. All he had to do was say yes. "No," he said out loud. "No weapons. We're not starting a war. Clarification. Non-lethal options available, deterrent systems, shield technology, methods to prevent access without causing harm." That was different. Taman thought fast. The predecessors had left this as a test, not just about accessing the archive, but about what humanity would do with the power. If they responded with violence, they would prove the traditionalists right. But if they did nothing, they would lose everything. "Show me the non-lethal options," he said. Information flooded his mind. Shield systems that could surround the entire archive. Sensor dampening that would make it impossible to target. Communication systems that could broadcast to every ship in the fleet simultaneously. And something else. Something creative. Taman ran back to the command center where Hana was still negotiating with Morvan. "Captain, I have an idea. The archive can help us, but we need to make a choice. Do we trust it?" Hana looked at him, then at the fleet on the display. "What kind of help?" "Non-lethal. Defensive. But it will prove we have access to predecessor technology that they don't. It might make things better or worse." "Chancellor," Hana said, turning back to the screen. "You say we're too primitive to handle this technology. Let me prove you wrong. Give us 1 hour. If we can't demonstrate proper custodianship, we'll discuss terms. Morvan considered this. 1 hour. But my fleet will be ready to act if you attempt anything hostile. The connection closed. Hana nodded to Taman. Do it. Whatever it is. Taman returned to the core and connected fully with the archive systems. He authorized the defensive protocols. But more than that, he authorized something the archive called the Truth Protocol. The archive came alive. Shields formed around the structure, shimmering barriers that would stop any weapon the fleet possessed. But that was just the beginning. The archive began broadcasting, not to the ships, but to every crew member on every vessel. It showed them what Taman had seen. The history of the predecessors, their slow refinement into extinction, the genetic degradation data for their own species, the warnings that had been left specifically for advanced civilizations. But the archive did something else too. It analyzed each crew member's biology and showed them personally how close they were to genetic collapse, how their species' choices had affected their own future, how their children and grandchildren would suffer if nothing changed. It was not a weapon. It was truth. Raw, undeniable personal truth. On the bridge of the flagship, High Chancellor Morvan saw the data applied to their own body. They had 800 years left to live, but their genetic line would die with them. Their species had 300 years before population collapse. And it was all because of choices made in the name of refinement. The fleet did not attack. Ship by ship, their weapons powered down. Crews sat in shocked silence, processing what they had learned. Finally, Morvan contacted them again. The Chancellor looked tired, old. You have made your point, Captain Yoon. The evidence is overwhelming. We didn't want to make a point, Hana said. We wanted to share the truth. The predecessors left this for everyone. Not just for us, but they left it in a lock that only you could open. Because we're still close to what they were, Jiwoo said, joining the conversation. Not because we're better, because we haven't changed as much. That's all. Ambassador Velthor stepped forward. Chancellor, I have spent these weeks with the humans. They are chaotic, yes, unpredictable, emotional. But they are also creative, adaptable, and wise in ways we have forgotten. They did not use weapons when offered them. They chose truth instead. Does that sound primitive to you? Morvan was quiet for a long time. Then they spoke, their voice heavy with something that might have been shame. No, it sounds like what we should have done. They looked directly at Hana. What do you propose, Captain? A partnership, Hana said. Humanity will maintain custodianship of the core. We'll share all technology and knowledge freely, but we need help. We need scientists, diplomats, teachers from across the galaxy, not to control us, but to work with us, to help us understand what we've found and to help you understand what you've lost. And in return, Morvan asked, in return you stop treating us like children. You stop trying to refine us or civilize us or make us like you. You let us be messy and chaotic and human. Because that's what the galaxy needs right now. Another long silence. Then Morvan nodded slowly. Agreed. I will present this proposal to the full council. But I believe it will pass. You have changed my mind, Captain Yoon. That is not easy to do. As the fleet began to withdraw, Taman felt the archive pulse around him. Another message came, this time with something that felt almost like approval. Test complete. Custodian species human, approved. Response to power, non-violent. Response to threat, creative. Response to responsibility, mature. Full archive access granted. Wait, Taman said. That was a test? The whole thing? Affirmative, opening core, initial assessment, response to power and pressure. Primary evaluation. Predecessors required proof that compatible species would use knowledge wisely. Species human, successful. Taman laughed. He couldn't help it. They had been tested from the moment he sneezed, and they hadn't even known it. What happens now? Level 2. Access unlocked. Advanced protocols available. Tools for preserving chaos. Systems for preventing stagnation. Methods for ensuring. No species repeats predecessor mistakes. New chambers appeared in the core. Vast libraries of knowledge that had been hidden until now. Medical technology, social systems, educational protocols. Everything the predecessors wished they had created before it was too late. Minho whistled when he saw it all. That's a lot of responsibility for a guy who just wanted to fix air filters. Taman looked at his hands. His imperfect, allergy-prone, completely human hands. I guess we better not mess it up then. We won't, Hana said confidently, because we're going to do this the human way. Messy, chaotic, and together with everyone who wants to help. That's how we solve impossible problems. Velthor approached them, their crystal bodies showing new patterns of light. I have made a decision. I will undergo genetic restoration. Reintroduce random elements into my biology. It will be uncomfortable. Possibly painful. But if humanity can save the galaxy by being imperfect, then I can help by becoming imperfect too. You don't have to do that, Jiwoo said gently. Yes, I do. For 340 years, I believed refinement was wisdom. You taught me in 3 weeks that wisdom is knowing when to embrace chaos. I want to learn what I have been missing, Taemin smiled. Welcome to being messy, Ambassador. Fair warning, allergies are terrible. I look forward to it, Velthor said, and somehow Taemin believed they meant it. 6 months had passed since the crisis at the archive. Taemin stood in what was now called the Human Embassy, looking out at a view that still amazed him every day. The archive had transformed from a cold research station into something alive and vibrant. Gardens grew alongside alien technology. Trees from Earth mixed with crystalline plants from a dozen other worlds. Recreation areas bustled with beings from hundreds of species. And everywhere there was laughter. Real, genuine, spontaneous joy. Something the archive had not heard in 50,000 years. The cafeteria alone was a revolution. For the first time in galactic history, food from different worlds was served together, including dishes that triggered allergies, caused digestive chaos, and generally created the kind of biological mess that refined species had eliminated ages ago. And beings were choosing to eat them anyway. Taemin sneezed. His allergies were back, triggered by some flowering plant from a Velthari garden. He smiled as he wiped his nose. 6 months ago, he would have been embarrassed. Now it just felt normal, human. Still refusing the cure, I see, a familiar voice said. Taemin turned to see Ambassador Velthor approaching. The Velthari looked different now. Their crystal body had small imperfections, cracks that formed new patterns. And they moved differently too, with less perfect grace and more genuine energy. This defect saved the galaxy, Taemin said, repeating words that had become his standard answer. I'm keeping it. I understand completely. I sneezed yesterday. First time in 300 years. Velthor's light pattern showed something that looked like pride. It was wonderful. The genetic restoration program had been Velthor's idea. They were the first of their species to volunteer, choosing to reintroduce random genetic elements. Other Velthari had followed. Not all of them, and not without resistance, but enough to start reversing the damage. How are the others doing? Taemin asked. 12 more species have started restoration programs. The results are promising. Uncomfortable, but promising. Velthor gestured to the gardens around them. We are learning to embrace chaos again. It is not easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, Taemin said. That's something humans learned a long time ago. They walked together through the embassy toward the core. Taemin had become the archive's chief operations officer, a title that still felt too big for him, but the archive responded to him in ways it did not respond to others. It trusted him. In the main hall, they passed a classroom where human children learned alongside young aliens. The diversity education program, Hana had called it, teaching the next generation that differences were strengths, not weaknesses. That chaos and order could coexist. One of the children, a human girl with bright eyes, waved at Taemin. Is it true you opened the archive by sneezing? Taemin knelt down to her level. I did, but I didn't open it alone. The archive was looking for people who were still authentically themselves, people who weren't afraid to be imperfect. What if I sneeze? She asked worriedly. Will something else open? Maybe, Taemin said honestly. Or maybe you'll solve a problem in a way no one expected. That's the beauty of being unpredictable. We're going to teach you how to use amazing technology, but more importantly, we're going to teach you that it's okay to be yourself. Your quirks, your mistakes, your chaos. Those aren't problems. They're who you are. The girl smiled and ran back to her class. Taemin stood, feeling the weight of responsibility and the lightness of hope at the same time. In the observation deck overlooking the core, Captain Hana, Dr. Jiwoo, and Commander Doyen were waiting. Hana had been promoted to humanity's ambassador to the Galactic Council. She spent most of her time traveling between worlds now, but she made time to visit the archive regularly. Ji-woo held her daughter, a 5-year-old girl with her mother's curiosity. The child had been conceived naturally without genetic optimization. Ji-woo had refused all the perfect options, choosing instead to let nature take its course. Her daughter was healthy, happy, and wonderfully unpredictable. "How are the restoration programs going?" Hana asked as Taemin and Velthor joined them. "Better than expected," Velthor said. "We estimate population stability will return to most species within 200 years. If they continue the programs." "And if they don't?" Doyen asked. He was still security chief, still watchful, but he had learned to trust more than he used to. "Then they will learn the hard way," Velthor said simply. "We cannot force change. We can only show them why it matters." Below them, new students arrived at the archive, a ship full of young beings from across the galaxy, all coming to learn at what had become the most important educational center in known space. They looked nervous and excited as they stepped into the entrance hall. "Do you think we're doing this right?" Ji-woo asked quietly, watching them. "I have no idea," Velthor admitted. "And that is exactly right. The predecessors were certain they were correct. That certainty destroyed them. We are uncertain, making mistakes, learning as we go, and we are thriving because of it." "The galaxy needed someone to sneeze at the right moment," Doyen said with a rare smile. "Might as well be us." They laughed together, a sound that still felt revolutionary in the ancient halls of the archive. And somewhere in the core, the archive recorded everything, adding it to its database of productive chaos. That evening, Taemin found himself alone in the core again. He often came here late at night when the crowds were gone and he could think clearly. The archive seemed to like these quiet moments too. Its walls pulsed with gentle light like breathing. A holographic display activated without prompting. A final message, one he had not seen before. "Taemin Park," the archive said in its ancient voice. "Final assessment complete. Species humanity has maintained chaos while gaining knowledge, has shared power without seeking control, has remained imperfect by choice, not ignorance. Full custodianship confirmed, thank you," Taemin said. "But we couldn't have done this alone. We needed partners. Velthor, Kenta, even Morvan eventually. This isn't just humanity's victory." "Correct," the archive agreed. "The predecessors worked alone in their final days. This was their failure. Humanity chose cooperation. This is your strength." Message from Predecessor Council, final entry. "Thank you for staying human. Now teach the galaxy to do the same." The hologram showed a new image, not of the past but of the future, projections of galactic civilization over the next 1,000 years. Innovation rates were climbing for the first time in 10 millennia. Population curves were stabilizing. Art, music, and creative expression were flourishing across hundreds of worlds. The galaxy was healing, slowly, messily, chaotically, but healing. "Will it be enough?" Taemin asked. "Unknown," the archive admitted. "The future is chaos. This is as it should be. Certainty is death. Uncertainty is life. You have given the galaxy uncertainty again. This is the greatest gift." Taemin nodded, accepting the weight and the wonder of it all. He thought about where he had been 6 months ago. A self-conscious engineer who hated his allergies, who felt inadequate compared to the refined species around him. Now he understood that his imperfections were not weaknesses. They were the most important things about him. His personal communicator buzzed. A message from Hijin Nam, the communications officer he had worked with since the beginning. They had grown close over the months, bonding over shared experiences and late-night conversations about the weight of changing history. The message was simple. "Dinner tomorrow? I want to ask you something important." Taemin smiled. He had a feeling he knew what she wanted to ask, and he knew his answer would be yes. Because life was meant to be lived, not optimized. Messy, unpredictable, and beautiful. He was about to leave when the archive activated one more display. This one showed a recording, made by the last predecessor before they finally transcended into whatever they became. The being in the hologram looked tired but peaceful. To whoever finds this, to whoever proves themselves worthy by simply being authentically alive, I have one final message. We spent our last moments wishing we could return to what we were. Wishing we could feel one random emotion. Make one unplanned decision. Sneeze one more time. You have what we lost. You are messy and chaotic and unpredictable and alive in ways we can no longer be. Please, I beg you, never take that for granted. Every sneeze, every random laugh, every spontaneous decision. Those are miracles. We tried to be gods. You please just try to be alive. That is enough. That is everything. The hologram faded. Taman stood in the quiet core, feeling the weight of those words. Then, because the universe had a sense of humor, he sneezed. The archive chimed softly, a sound that might have been approval or might have been laughter. Taman smiled and wiped his nose. Yeah, I know. Being perfectly imperfect. It's my job now. He left the core and walked back through the embassy. Around him, life flourished in all its chaotic glory. Humans and aliens learning from each other. Children playing games that mixed rules from a dozen different worlds. Scientists making discoveries by combining order and chaos in new ways. Artists creating beauty from the collision of different perspectives. In the cafeteria, engineer Minho was recording another episode of his show. Humans React To had become wildly popular across the galaxy. This week's episode featured him trying food from a species whose cuisine was literally toxic to humans. He was laughing even as he reached for the antidote. You're going to kill yourself one day, Taman called out. But what a way to go, Minho replied cheerfully. Besides, someone has to show the galaxy that mistakes can be fun. Taman shook his head but smiled. That was humanity in a nutshell. Making mistakes, learning from them, laughing about them, and somehow turning them into opportunities. 5 years from now, historians would write about this time. They would call it the Great Awakening, when the galaxy remembered how to dream again. They would study the archive's opening and the genetic restoration programs. They would analyze the data and the decisions, but they would miss the most important part. The small moments, the first sneeze of a Veltari who had chosen imperfection, the laughter of children learning that being different was wonderful, the quiet pride of a human engineer who had learned to love his flaws. Those were the moments that mattered. Those were the miracles. As Taman reached his quarters, he looked back at the archive one more time. Its walls pulsed with light like a living heartbeat. Inside that ancient structure lay the knowledge of a civilization that had tried to become perfect and lost everything. But it also held their hope. Their belief that someone, somewhere, would learn from their mistakes. Humanity had found that knowledge by accident, by being messy and chaotic and authentically themselves. And now they had a choice. Use that knowledge to become something greater, or use it to stay exactly what they were. Taman knew which choice humanity would make. They would take the technology, learn from the wisdom, extend their lifespans and cure their diseases. But they would keep the chaos. Keep the unpredictability. Keep the ability to sneeze at inopportune moments and laugh about it later. Because being human was not a stage to outgrow. It was not a problem to solve. It was a gift to cherish, and that gift, that beautiful, messy, chaotic gift, might just be enough to save the galaxy. Taman entered his quarters and prepared for sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new opportunities to make mistakes and learn from them. He would have dinner with Heejin and probably say yes to whatever she asked. He would continue teaching others how to use the archive while staying true to themselves. He would sneeze, laugh, and maybe cry a little. He would be perfectly, wonderfully, gloriously imperfect, and he would not have it any other way. Somewhere in the core, the archive continued its eternal work, recording, learning, remembering, and celebrating the fact that after 50,000 years of waiting, it had finally found what it was looking for. Not perfection, life.